Today on Talking Point Live, what's the matter with our broken education system? It's America's most archaic system we've been dealing with for far too long. It's time for a change, don't you think?
Yeah, are you talking about SAGE testing?
Landon Vancel, associate producer, what are you doing here?
I'll just fill it in for Jen.
She's
she
in for
decided
Jen
to take a
Kohler.
vacation, I guess.
Yeah, who is gone for a couple of weeks. We're going to be talking about what to do with education when we come back after 2 minutes. Stay with us for Talking Point Live.
I am a winner. I am Dixie.
SouthernUtahLive.com brings you live streaming and archived on-demand free video, including community and cultural events, local high school and DSU sports, city council, county commission, and chamber of commerce meetings, CEC TV studio interviews with people you know, and important events like the Economic Summit, the St. George Marathon, music concerts, cooking shows, high school graduations, the Doc Utah Film Festival, and more. Go to SouthernUtahLive.com for live streaming and video on demand.
I'm a winner. I'm Dixie.
It's Friday, February 27th, 2015. This is Talking Point Live. I'm Eric Young.
And I'm really nervous.
And we're glad to have you here. This is Landon Vancel. She's filling in for my colleague, Jen Kohler, who is off in Georgia taking care of some business there and will be gone for the next 2 weeks. So we have Landon for this week's show and for next week's show. How do you feel about that?
I'm glad I get to come back next week. Maybe I'll redeem myself if I don't do good
there'll
today.
There'll be nothing you'll have to redeem here, I'm sure. It's a little bit different being in front of the camera, though, than it is being in the control room.
Yes. I'm kind of jealous of our director, Lauren, back there watching it instead of being in front of it.
So typically you would be coordinating graphics and rolling tape and doing that kind of thing?
Yes.
Okay. Yeah, really it all boils down to her. She's the boss as far as the program is concerned when it comes to putting this all together. And I have to hand it to our production crew today. We've had all kinds of different kinds of lighting with the clouds coming and going, and now we're in full sunlight, and 10 minutes before we go live, they go through and do a full revamp. So my hat's off to the crew in being able to pull off the visual quality that you're seeing on today's show. And we are talking about the broken education system and public education system here in the United States. Both of us, I'm guessing, are products of that. You grew up in Moab?
I did.
Attended public school there?
Yep, Grand County Devil right here.
A Grand County Devil.
Yes.
Well, we could talk all day long just about your mascot, but I guess we
True.
won't in that respect. And I grew up in the Bay Area and went through public education there. And as you can probably imagine, there's a little bit of a generational difference between Landon and I, and yet I could probably suggest that we both were subjected to pretty much the same system as far as behavioral management, classroom management is concerned, and the types of outcomes and how those outcomes are measured, basically.
Yeah, I bet the only difference is I didn't get hit with a ruler.
How'd you know I got hit with a ruler?
I think you've talked about it before. I'm sure you've mentioned it in class.
That wasn't my Catholic school upbringing. That was before the public school in California, and that's, again, a different story for another time. What I want to do, though, is first off set up some context for public education, because really it's a product of the industrial era. When we came out of the Second World War, we needed to come up with a system that would go through and address perhaps a standardized approach to rebuilding the economy and putting citizens into positions who had certain levels of literacy and mathematics and science, right?
Yeah, they had to fill that workplace.
So they create these legions of individuals in classes where they can go through and measure all at the same time their ability to go through and write and read and arithmetic as well. And then once they're checked off on that, they'll move them on to the next level. And in the industrialized era, the next level wasn't necessarily higher education. It had to do with getting into some job, some position, be it manufacturing, agriculture, whatever the case might be, that really didn't have the necessary requirements in critical thinking or thinking beyond what's
Not at
happening.
all. No.
Yeah, on a high school level. How did your high school prepare you for that transition? And granted, anymore, the industrial era was over long before I even came along, and certainly the push for my generation was now the next step is to go to college and do something. But the K through 12 system didn't change in that respect as far as
Not a whole
prepping
lot, no.
people out just to meet those basic requirements.
No.
Did it change for you?
I had a few teachers that definitely focused on preparing for college and made you want to learn. They had projects that really just gave you that desire to go and search on your own. But other than that, we focused a lot on testing and preparing for those tests. And I was telling Eric last night as we talked about it that we would spend 2 weeks at the end of the year just cramming for tests, trying to remember everything that we had been taught the whole year.
So you're talking about standardized tests like the ACT or
Yes.
the SAT?
Yes, the ACT was awful. I hated it.
Did you aspire to a career where that's all you did in your career was take standardized tests?
I don't think there's a career like that.
There's not, and
No.
yet that's what we do to go through and matriculate kids into what we call society
Sure.
or into some kind of functionality that way. But before I get it and we start bashing on SATs and ACTs and SAGE testing that you're getting into, and we're going to get into Common Core a little bit as well, but you bring up the idea that there was some effective stuff that happened with you within your high school. And we've talked about this previously as well.
Oh, yeah.
What was the most effective approach for you, do you think?
The most effective approach to me would probably be the people or the teachers that let me explore my own interests.
What
And,
specifically? What teacher? What was the class?
I had an English teacher, and she had a multi-genre project, and most people in my grade actually really disliked her because it was such a hard project to do. And it was. I stayed up countless nights doing it,
But they had to say the word genre to begin with.
Yes, it's true. But we got to choose all sorts of different ways to share the information that we learned, whether it was through a newspaper article or a journal. I actually focused my project on the Pioneer Trek
Okay.
from Nauvoo to Utah. So
Okay.
I wrote journal entries from pioneers and things like that. So
When you say multi-genre, though, what do you mean by that?
genre being how we display the information. So newspaper is a
Okay.
type of
How you
genre,
put it, okay,
journal
all right.
is a type of genre.
Okay. And we call that constructivism.
Yes.
It's really going through and telling a student, well, tell us everything you know about the Mormon Trek, and it's up to you to go through and frame that and put that together. Was that how
Yeah.
she approached it that way?
Yes, yes.
Which is a huge departure. How do you test for something like that?
It wasn't a test. It was,
It was a portfolio kind of
yeah,
thing,
it was a
wasn't
portfolio.
You
I still
showed
have it.
what you do,
It was
really.
the one thing that I kept from high school.
Yeah.
So
And that's the problem, because we can't go through and engage kids on a constructivist level and then go through and try to assess them on a standardized level. It doesn't work. If we had to go through and assess them, we would have to look at each child individually according to their applications made within their given portfolios.
right?
Wouldn't that be terrific?
Yeah, like adaptive testing.
Like Adaptive testing?
Adaptive testing.
Wow, that's an amazing term, something that we probably need to talk a little bit more about. So is that what SAGE testing is adaptive testing?
Yeah, in a sense, it goes through and it's done online. And as you make your answer, how would you say that? As you choose what you're going to pick for your answer, it changes your questions as you go
Okay.
to measure where you're at.
Measure your critical ability within
Yes.
the actual test?
Yes.
But what happens if you're actually afraid to be taking the test to begin with?
Oh, like me?
You like,
Then that really is hard because it doesn't actually show how smart you are. And I think a lot of students are impacted by that, and it can hold them back.
what did your test anxiety do to you when you took the SAT or the ACT?
I took the ACT, and I didn't know what to do. I felt like I was fairly smart. I didn't think that I was dumb by any means, but I didn't know how to answer the questions because I was so worried, and everything that I had learned just kind of slipped away.
Kind of flew out the window.
Yes, it was
So,
gone.
nonetheless, though, regardless of your test anxiety, they stamped a number on you.
Yes.
And that number meant for you what? Or what did it mean to your high school counselor in making decisions as to what you want to do with your life?
I'm sure it held me back from a few colleges. Me personally, it bugged me because I wasn't as smart as the rest of my grade. Smart, I guess.
Your number wasn't as good as the rest
Nope,
of your grade, and
my
you
number wasn't
went
as
through and
good.
associated that number with your own intelligence.
Yes.
That in and of itself is the inherent problem with standardized testing, which goes back to the whole concept of what's wrong with American public education, K through 12. We're going to come back with a little bit more of an analysis on SAGE and Common Core, and then we'll actually get into some answers about this issue on Talking Point Live. Stay with us. We'll be right back.
There's a shelter pet who wants to meet you. Meet one today. Visit theshelterpetproject.org. Adopt.
People think I'm trash, but they're wrong. Today I'm just an aluminum can, but one day I could be a stadium.
Okay, so what would you bring to my company?
What do you need?
I need problem-solving skills.
I got through high school without a car, a phone, or a computer.
No college degree, though.
Not yet, but life's taught me a lot, and I'm ready for more.
Well, you're not the typical kind of candidate that I hire. But you are exactly what I'm looking for.
Your company could be missing out on the candidates it needs most. Learn how to find a great pool of untapped talent at gradsoflife.org.
Here in the Washington County School District, we are proud of our commitment to education. This focus on learning gives every child the best chance for academic success. We are proud to introduce the concept of professional learning communities, or PLCs. Now we as educators work together to focus on learning as the outcome and to collectively meet the needs of your children.
Oh, look, a redhead. Staring contest. You still got it. I know.
Come alive with the forest.
The dad was cute.
You were looking right at us.
Visit discovertheforest.org to find a forest near you.
Welcome back to Talking Point Live, coming to you live from the campus of Dixie State University in St. George, Utah. Hi, I'm Eric Young, here with my colleague,
Landon Vansel.
Landon Vansel is in for Jennifer Kohler.
Kohler, yes.
So since you joined us, we probably have an additional viewer like your mom, right?
Yeah, at least one, hopefully.
Okay, we appreciate your contribution to the show that way. We're talking about the broken education system. And you know, that's a pretty hyperbolic term to say it's broken. Certainly it's turning out lots of stellar students and who have the ability to go on and to do some great things on a university level, or to not go into trades or go into something. Certainly it's working on a level, but it's not working on the level that certain people feel that we should be reaching as far as an international level is concerned. In fact, for a couple of decades now, we have lagged behind certain other industrialized countries as far as the type of students we've been putting out there. And we've had a number of attempts at trying to bring up that level. One was done with the Bush administration as far as No Child Left Behind was concerned. And that raised all kinds of issues and a little too much federal intervention there. And then along came the Obama administration, who decided to implement the Common Core. And this has been about 3 or 4 years now with the Common Core. And there's been lots of proponents and lots of opponents about it. Most of the opponents come from the idea that there shouldn't be any kind of federal meddling around in something that is as intimate and dear to us as an education. The proponents, though, go through and say, well, what this is doing, though, it's raising the overall outcome level as far as student skills, especially in the sciences and in mathematics, in order for them to be more competitive with students from outside the United States, within our own colleges and universities, and within our own commerce. So along with Common Core then comes a way to have to assess that. And what a lot of people don't understand as far as education is concerned is education is not simply about teaching and creating a learning environment. In fact, to this day, psychologically, we still don't know how that process actually even works. What happens on a synaptic level? We're still guessing as far as that's concerned.
It's different for everyone, right?
Exactly. We have oral learners, visual learners, tactile learners, and so on. It's different for everybody. And so nobody can really go through and claim, well, this is how we all learn. In fact, what we need to do is be more adaptive. My point here is, though, it's not about the teaching necessarily. It's about how we assess how that message is coming across to students. And part of that assessment deals with SAGE testing.
SAGE testing.
So what is that?
SAGE testing has 3 different parts, and it's used to measure students and how much they've learned over the year. There's the summative part of it, and that is like the one big test at the end of the year that says you either pass it or you don't.
So you take all this information garnered throughout an entire school
From
year.
August to May, yeah.
And it's that dreaded summative, meaning it's a comprehensive test. Those are the words we
Yes.
hated to hear in high school.
And it takes forever to take. I actually talked to my niece last night. She spent 3.5 hours answering 2 writing questions.
Wow.
Yeah, and
Okay.
she wasn't the only one. All of her friends took that long too.
But yet those writing questions, her writing itself is being analyzed or assessed not by a pair of human eyes,
Nope.
but by algorithms that are set to go through and look at structure, usage, grammar, that type of thing.
Yes.
Wow. Okay, so what else makes up that?
There's the interim, right?
The interim.
Interim.
Okay, what is that?
And that is just tests that students can take all throughout the year to kind of prepare
Okay.
and
So that
see what it's going to be like.
That prepares them for the SAGE testing.
Yes.
Interesting. Okay.
I've taken one of those.
So did I, and I didn't do very well.
I didn't do
with
well
it.
at all.
I did the science part of it to see how that would come across, and I have to say, frankly, the SAGE interface isn't very intuitive at all for this old 50-some-odd-year-old guy. I can't. Well, 4-year-olds, I'm sure, are picking up on it just fine, but I just didn't find it to be all that intuitive.
I didn't like it a whole lot.
Okay, so you have the summative, you have the interim, and then what?
And then there's the formative, and that is basically just tools that teachers and students and parents can all use to assess their knowledge and apply it each day.
Would that be more of the constructivist approach to how
Yeah, they're probably
we're
trying
learning
there.
something? Can you give me an example of what's formative that way?
It didn't talk a whole lot about it on the SAGE site that I saw, and my niece didn't have a whole lot to say when I asked her about it.
Typically
as to what they do in class. They said that they don't do anything in class, and that most of the time it's all just homework.
It's all homework. They're forming their own questions. They're trying to find out their own answers, and using technology like the internet or along with their devices as channels for that to go through and find the answers that they're looking for. That's on a given worksheet or within a textbook. What's going to happen with worksheets and textbooks, do you think?
I think they'll go away eventually. Everyone will have an iPad.
An entire publishing industry making sure that that's not going to happen, right?
They're trying, yeah.
We're going to have to adapt somewhere along the line?
I would guess.
Yeah, it's not just a guess. We're going to have to adapt on some level to realize what technology is bringing to the game of education and how we can use that perhaps to bring all the levels, have a rising tide that lifts all boats, that brings us to a level that's much more competitive across the planet.
SAGE is working on that.
Yeah, but it's not working.
It's not working though.
Because it gets back to that standardized idea that everybody should be at this level. Well, we're going to come back and talk about a software approach and a developer who's looking at an alternative to this type of standardized learning and standardized testing. Here on Talking Point Live, we'll be back in 2 minutes.
I'm a winner. I am Dixie.
We are proud to introduce the concept of professional learning communities. Today, teaching practices focus on the collaboration of highly effective teams of teachers working together. Since the implementation of the PLC process in our schools, data has consistently remained above the state average in nearly every measure. There is nothing more important to us than helping your child learn and grow.
When I was in foster care, I never knew when I would have to move.
so I always had my suitcase ready to go. Then one day, I was adopted. My new parents opened their hearts and home to me. My parents cook my favorite breakfast for me every morning. My parents take me on trips I never thought I would go on. They gave me a home and an even better reason to use that suitcase. My parents aren't perfect, but they're perfect for me.
I'm a winner. I'm Dixie.
So this just in, apparently Landon's mom is watching Mrs. Vansel. Her hair looks just fine to me. We're hoping that Mr. Vansel's there as well. We've added 2 people to our audience on the show. Thank you for watching. We're talking about the broken, or maybe, again, that's a misnomer, an archaic education system, something that could be improved now with some new tools that are out there. One of those tools is a new software technology that
Every week.
we get that around the same time too. A new software technology that was developed by a guy by the name of Jose Ferrer, and I hope I'm saying his name right. We have a graphic of him, if we can put that up. This is a guy who actually worked in the testing industry. He worked for people who would proctor SAT and ACT and GRE and all kinds of.
Job.
No kidding.
How boring.
And while he was working for them, he realized he found a hole in the way the tests were administered and
How
was
would
able
you
to
not
go
find
through.
a hole in that?
Right. He was able to go through and actually tear down the validity of an ACT test. And they listened to what he had to say. Anyway, the guy's brilliant, and he came up with this concept, not necessarily of what you're calling for is adaptive assessment, and this is what it does, but what Jose calls this is adaptive learning.
Right.
And it's using technology and using a device to go through and track what happens with a student at any level, from K through 12 or in higher education. That goes through and adapts and gives them tips and tricks on to how to go through and do things better. We have a video interview with him. Let me roll this. This is from a documentary that was put together by Ericsson.
Newton is a data mining and adaptive learning platform that allows anybody, anywhere, to upload content. They could be a publisher or an individual teacher, anything in between, and produce a course that will be uniquely personalized to each student based on what she knows, how she learns best. The textbook of the future is going to be delivered on connected devices. What that means is the incredible amount of data that students have always produced when they studied are now capturable and usable. So Newton, and any product built on Newton, can figure out things like, you learn math best in the morning between 8:32 and 9:14 a.m. You learn science best in 40-minute bite sizes. At the 42-minute mark, your click rate always begins to decline. We should pull that from you then and move you to something else to keep you engaged. That 35-minute burst you do at lunch every day, you're not retaining any of that. Just hang out with your friends and do that stuff in the afternoon instead when you learn better. You learn this stuff best with short questions, this stuff best with complicated, difficult questions. We should return this type of material to you 4 days later for optimal retention. And here's exactly the things you're going to struggle with at your homework tonight because you haven't learned some of the concepts that are embedded in that material. And we can go in real time, grab you the perfect little bit of content from last month or last year and put that seamlessly in front of you so that you don't struggle. We can predict failure in advance and prevent it from happening. We're going to move from this kind of alienating and in some cases boring, in some cases frustrating model if everybody gets the exact same stuff. They're getting it at the exact same time, the exact same order, the exact same difficulty level. You know, for half the class it's too hard, for half the class it's too boring. It's going to get the most advanced kids the most stimulating material. It's going to get them to unlock their potential in a way that they're not today. But for every kid, no matter how much you're struggling, you've got a path to success. It might take you a little longer, but you will have a path to success no matter what. And also the system gets smarter and smarter as more people use it. Strategies compete against each other to be replicated in the next generation. So the strategy that's most effective for you, once we find that, any kid who's like you in the future will have that strategy teed up. It's a whole new thing. It's like, when people, when the automobile was invented, people weren't asking for the automobile, they were asking for faster horses. And people aren't really asking for Newton because they don't really know what it is yet. But once they see it and experience it, then they.
So, Professor, how do educators factor into this?
Yeah, that's a great question. That's the question my wife and I talked about this morning as we were talking about the show. She's a teacher too.
Okay.
And I think teachers might have a predisposition to be threatened by a technology that can come along and replace them.
Right.
And Jose argues that the teacher still has a place within Newton. And that place is to go through and to continue to assess what's happening. Let me explain a little bit more how Newton works. It works on the same type of idea of recommendation algorithms that Google works upon. So as you go through and you search, say on Amazon or wherever you might be searching for, Google starts to acquire a profile about you, about what your preferences are, what kinds of websites you would like to see, what kind of rhetoric you'd like to listen to, as opposed to all the other stuff that's out there. Newton does the same thing, but it takes a look at it contextually from the time of day when you're doing well to the time of day where you're not doing well. You're doing well with math at 10 o'clock in the morning, but you really suck at math at 2 o'clock in the afternoon. So let's go through and concentrate on manipulatives at that part of the day, and then use maybe the afternoon for something a little bit more relaxing having to do with language arts. Okay. And then let's engage in science really at the beginning of the day, the top of the day. Well, what Newton can't do and what your iPad can't do is go through and put you then into a lab environment where you're making the actual application of what's happening. And that's what teachers need to learn how to do. Many do them great. There are great constructive facilitators that are out there, but we need to maybe get away from the idea that all your knowledge is going to come from my brain and into you.
Me.
Instead, we have to go through and say...
Doesn't it mention the fact that teachers shouldn't give answers?
Yes.
They should ask questions?
Yeah, well, the documentary does that. I'll post a documentary up on our Facebook page so you can watch the entire documentary, because it gets into the minds of Sugata Mitra, who did this wonderful experiment in Delhi, India, at his university. He put a PC computer in a wall, and kids who could not read, kids who were illiterate, or kids who were too young to even be getting into that, learned to manipulate the system within a couple of days and became self-taught within that system. Now, I know all kinds of people are rolling their eyes at this point and thinking, oh, well, we can't just turn it over to the internet. No, the teachers have that burden, that responsibility, the stewardship, that's a better word, the stewardship to go through then and assess how students are actually making application with the knowledge.
Right.
And providing constructs for them, taking them out of the stinking classroom and putting them in environments where they can do the math. They can see how light goes through and shades something. You can see what happens with geodynamics. They could make applications, they could write about it and journal about that. They can go through and blog and put that up and have
so kind of like what I'm doing right now.
Exactly.
Experience.
What you're doing here. Well, at Dixie State, we call that experiential learning.
Yes.
What's been your best experience? Well, right now during this show, is that what you're talking about?
Yeah, this is experience.
Absolutely.
Definitely getting experience.
Any other experiential situations you've been in?
I've done an internship with a photographer. I've worked in the control room. I've done plenty of different things while I've been here. I've had classes that have sent me out to take pictures, your VisCom class. Spent time in the studio.
You can't get that experience inside of a classroom.
No, doesn't come from a textbook.
And we're learning more and more of this. We've gotten to a point to where kids aren't going out to the playground anymore because of a litigious society. More school districts and playground equipment people are getting sued because of that. How much time do I have left? 45 seconds? Okay, all right. Well, I'll get off my high horse and we'll go through and finish up the show. So is technology the answer to this?
I think it could be. I think it plays a huge role.
And something's got to happen, though, to turn the crank on this thing. I don't know if that has to happen legislatively, or do private industry need to get involved with this as well to start funding it? Maybe this is something we can pick up on our next show as well. Come back with a part 2 to this on Talking Point Live. Thank you for joining us today on the 27th of February.
February, yes.
It's still early in the morning for me. You've been watching Talking Point Live. I'm Eric Young.
And I'm Landon Vansel.
We'll see you next week.